morning, everybody. I found myself this morning thinking a lot about the persistence in the pattern. I just want to make a story out of this for us and try to understand if we're looking at a seasonal shift that could be quite important for ag across the entire country. Because what you've been looking at here is from January 1st through the end of April, what the average position of the 500 millibar height field has looked like. So in other words, troughs and ridges. What we've seen for most of that time period was just repeated troughs of low pressure coming into the west. We've also seen multiple times where there's been ridging over parts of the east, the southeast, and this has forced the jet stream to run right up in between the two in this direction. Now in winter, this has certain consequences. In spring, it's actually a different story. And I think it's just worth taking a moment to kind of explain what those differences are. In winter, what we do is we end up following the flow right through here as our main low pressure track. And what this tends to do is this tends to make the rain shadow off the Rocky Mountains quite large. It also tends to keep the west cold, very snowy, very wet. Tends to keep the south, southeast, all the way up the east coast a bit drier and a bit warmer. And we did see episodes of that throughout this past winter. This is what it did in terms of our precipitation. When you look back January 1st through May 1st, you're looking at precipitation ranks by climate district. And we can see the extent of the rain shadow happening because of the trajectory of these lows running off the Rocky Mountains. It is interesting to see that this region has been wet, but a lot of this has come lately. This has been, as we've transitioned into spring, because we did see throughout winter drought developing in this part of the country, because what did we not have? If all of our systems were doing this, they weren't cutting across the Midwest and running up the East Coast, or diving into the Gulf and running up the East Coast. We didn't have any of these big East Coast cyclones this winter. But you can also see from this map who saw a lot of winter precipitation. We discussed this extensively throughout winter, but I just thought I'd show you one last time. This is the winter 2022 to 2023 accumulated snowfall departure map. And when we just look at this time frame, we're not going to stare at the numbers. We're just going to look at the colors. We can see clearly who was very snowy and who missed out on a lot of this. Now, lately, the pattern got into a block, and that block is still seen right here with this deep trough that's still spinning over Ontario into Quebec, the other one that's out over the open Atlantic, and there's that omega shape to it, all right? And this is what's kept the systems all bunched up. We've talked about that a lot. But notice what we've got redeveloping here. There's another trough diving into the west, which means we're still seeing the pattern favoring this. And a lot of us look at this and we try to understand why, and there's a lot of different things we can link together, but I just think there's the background state of the colder water that's off the west coast that's helping to reinforce this. It will take a seasonal transition, spring, even late into spring, to outdo this and to get rid of this, which means for a while in the month of May, we're going to be dealing with troughs that are still ejecting out of the southwest, out of California, out of the mountains. And in spring, when they pop off, because there's weaker flow overall, it actually tends to increase the stormy pattern in the midsection of the country. So in winter, we saw a large rain shadow. In spring, a similar setup actually allows for moisture to return to the area. Why? Overall, the flow is slower. So the systems don't just jump off the mountains and race. They come off as weak little short waves. And when they do so, they can draw moisture back farther and farther to the west. So I want to show you what I'm talking about. This is the current high pattern. Troughs are in blue, ridges are in red. As we play this throughout the remainder of this week, we continue to see a ridge opening in the midsection of the country, a high over low setup here that's helping to, do two things. One, this low is going to kick out and this high is going to reestablish here. And it's all being fed by flow that's diving around troughs that are on the western United States. So what we end up getting out of this pattern is broad warmth opening later in the week into the midsection of the country. We see troughs of low pressure producing southwest flow. We see ridging over, this part of the Gulf, And this is opening up for moisture transport into the central United States. This is what's going on over the next 10 to 15 days. Now, as we stretch it out there, we see continual troughs of low pressure coming into the northwest. And the heat's on now, but it will be fading because of these troughs. What I want to know, and this is what's most important to me in this forecast of the height pattern here, how long do we keep getting these things? See another one coming through here? This is just going to set up, going forward, more chances for storms in the drought-parched plains. Because as I play this out here into the middle of the month, there it is still. That flow, southwest flow, see it? Follow the contour lines. That's the way the winds are going to blow. And then we see out here going out to the 13th, 14th, 15th. the atmosphere is starting to back the trough up, maybe splitting the flow a bit across the west, but it's tending to come together like this across the rest of the country. And that's not necessarily a dry pattern for this part of the world. What it is for the west, though, is some relief from the constant deeper troughs that have been here. That means heat will begin to return to the west as we get toward the middle of the month, and also will back off on the precipitation there. Now, what I think is going to be feeding into this southwest flow is the fact that right now the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, this part of the Western Atlantic, is quite mild, very warm. It's interesting, you can also see some of the cold water showing up here at the mouth of the Mississippi. We have a lot of water flowing down the Mississippi right now. We've been showing lately the flooding issues that are happening between Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota on the Mississippi River. But this is going to be there to help fuel the low-level temperatures, to put the moisture into the atmosphere, which will advect or move into the central United States. So to distill all that down, while these troughs sit over the western United States, we still see in the early part of May wetter conditions compared to the climatological average. But we now start to see this whole corridor in through here opening up, especially along the Gulf, and then in these areas to above average precipitation. Now, I know you might be looking at it and saying, well, I see a lot of drier air in Iowa, parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, the eastern Corn Belt into the northeast. And I get it, I see that, but I still think that the pattern, which may start off drier, is going to open up to more storms in this area. All right. Now, some evidence of that was just released yesterday from NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center. They're now looking at that time frame. Remember, following what we've got the remainder of this week, they're looking at this time frame of the 10th through the 12th, possibly having just more advection of moisture and a greater risk of having heavier precipitation. And again, to frame this, the most important part is that this is where we've been for the last month. There is been a very large area in the midsection of the country. There's parts of the Cotton Belt down here that are dry. Southwest has been dry. California's been dry. But we need the dryness right now in California. So when we get more moisture coming into this area, it's not exactly a blessing of sorts, given that there's so much snow that still needs to be melted. But just thinking about this midsection of the country here, this is where we also have the drier soils. Going down to 16 inches, there are still areas in through here that have deficit. And that's also the area that's anchored in drought, especially in Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, parts of Colorado. That is a region that we need to see the moisture backing up to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So with that as a backdrop, let's go look at the models. Now remember, this is still ahead of us. Right now we're watching one deep low leave. This is the one that's been causing all of the snow here in parts of Michigan, Ontario. Some of it's pushing up against the Appalachian Mountains. We've seen snow reports in Pennsylvania and New York out of this as well. And early this morning we were watching another low curl up. This is the one you just saw at the beginning of the animation right here, curling up, that is going to be sliding through California, adding snow to the Sierra Nevada and some of the northern mountain ranges here like the Klamath Mountains. So playing through the morning into the afternoon on Tuesday. One other thing I'll be watching for is for thunderstorms to develop along the front range of the Rocky Mountains. You can see it in the models here. Still cold, soggy, still windy day around this low in parts of the eastern Corn Belt, eastern Great Lakes, and in New England. And playing out to early Wednesday morning. I mean, we're going to be pushing some snow up into Pennsylvania, higher elevation, into the Appalachian Mountains here, maybe several inches of accumulation there. And we're going to watch this low continue to spin. Now, the models have been toying with tossing something out here into Oklahoma, and to be honest, we're going to have to just get to this point in the day on Wednesday to see what comes out here, but I just want you to be aware of it. All right, this pattern begins to take a different shape once we get out here later in the week, talking about Thursday into Friday. And on Thursday, we are going to be keeping an eye out for the risk of strong storms to come out into parts of Texas and Oklahoma. We talked about this last night in the position of the dry line. But overall, take a look at the new one-week precipitation outlook from the WPC. We are much wetter in the Pacific Northwest. This is where the troughs keep coming in. But we do see those waves ejecting, and now we're opening up this area to better chances of storms. And that's what we typically see in the month of May. So to get some idea on the timing of it, let's compare the GFS and the European model. We're looking at the 0Z runs. Those are the latest available this morning. As I play this forward, we've already seen these two features, the one trough that's developing off the west coast and the one leaving the east coast. So I don't know, I'm looking over here at the European model because throughout the day on Thursday, this is Thursday evening, that's when we're watching that dry line jump out here it's going to try to press toward the I-35 corridor, but it may blow up the storms a bit earlier than that. Still showers pulling through, some snow in the Sierra Nevada here. But just notice, by getting into Friday, look at where the moisture is coming through. We talked last night in the in-depth about this coming out of Kansas into Missouri. Models are still on that. Missouri is a state that needs this moisture in a big way. So that's Friday. Getting into Saturday now, playing into the day on Sunday. Can you see how these waves just keep ejecting, bringing moisture into parts of the plain, stretching into all the way down to the Mid-South and South? We then play forward into Monday, into Tuesday, and we just keep seeing this same situation showing up here. So this is what those weaker troughs are doing in the western United States. So to distill it down into one map, this is what the next 10 days looks like in terms of the probability or the chance of getting at least an inch of precip. And there would be a lot of folks that would be happy about this here and very happy about this here. How far back to the west can we get that moisture? That's going to be the unknown, but we're going to watch for it. Also, look at the precipitation totals here in the west. Those persistent troughs are bringing these values up by bringing stronger westerly flow, which is loaded with moisture. All right, snow side of this. Just playing this out through the next week. Heavy snows right here in the Appalachian Mountains. We're still dealing with this snow today, and you can see the snow coming with the deeper troughs in the west. That's going to be hitting here in the Sierra Nevada, even parts of the Rocky Mountains. I'm heading out to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho today, so I'm hoping to get a good look at a lot of the snow in the west. I haven't been out there for a couple of months, and so I'll be excited to see what it looks like here, but certainly some more getting added in this area. Now, what about week 2? Now, notice in week 2, if we do end up splitting the flow a bit, this area goes over a bit drier. We can see, though, in the models, though, just kind of shading over the top of this area in both the GFS and the European is showing up with above average precipitation. So this is where I think the pattern's taking us in the near term. That's the precip side. Let's now talk about the temperature side. Because this morning we do have, well, there's actually winter storm warnings out here, but we're still dealing with the very strong winds on the backside of this low. This is all red flag warning. It is interesting to see red flag warning when our rivers are still in flood stage here. But we have a frost, a pretty deep frost that we're still watching early this morning here. And out west, all of this is hydrologic outlook for the melting of the snow. And there's been some great videos showing up of what some of the rivers look like right now because of this. And this is flood watching through here. Okay, current temperatures early this morning when I was recording this about 5:40. We can see that the frost line got down here pretty far into Nebraska. This would be a late frost for this area. Over the next 7 days, this is what the frost area looks like. So this includes this morning. This will be tomorrow morning, patchy frost in these areas. Remember, I set the threshold for this at 35 degrees. So I want you to know that I put it there because a lot of times we hit 35, there'll be patchy frost in certain areas. But we need to talk about what the temperature pattern is going to do and if there's any more frost risk out there as we head toward the middle of May. So first, this is our high temperatures for today. Brutally cold here, heat in the west. I mean, very, very hot in the west. Let me rephrase that. Pacific Northwest. The trough is already forming here over California. Going into Wednesday and Thursday, that warmth is expanding into the plains, into the Midwest. Getting into Friday, Saturday, and remember, we have the precip coming through here, but this is Saturday and into Sunday and Monday of next week. This is now when the broader ridge has opened itself up in the midsection of the country. Now that means over the next 7 days, we're picking up quite a bit of heat units. Find your location and look here and you'll see the growing degree days over the next 7 days being accumulated. I'm thinking about St. Louis picking up 100 of these. Parts of Iowa picking up between 70 and 100. This is what we need to get a crop to jump out of the ground in parts of the Midwest. From there, I want to show you my forecast using the European model on frost beyond the next 7 days. So this is this morning. And as we play through, this would be tomorrow morning's temperatures. There we go. And then as we look at this map, again, in gray, we're looking for where there's frost. We see that playing through Thursday into Friday morning, there's Friday morning, going out into Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning of next week, Wednesday morning of next week. Now, this isn't time frame that I'm watching very carefully because as we go out there, the European model, only in its 0Z run, next Thursday morning, tried to drop cold air into this area. And I went out there and I looked at this. I'm just going to pick a location. Let's pick Fargo. Come over to our website, agweather.com. You can start typing in Fargo. We'll click on it, put the index number in the box, click Submit. And what I want to show you here is when it builds your custom forecast, slide down to the bottom and look at the 10-day multi-model temperatures. And what is interesting is that right now, using all of the 0Z runs from the ECMWF, the GFS, and the National Blend of models, it is only the ECMWF that is trying to toss a temperature down there in the low 30s on the 11th. Okay, so it's an outlier. We need to see what the 12Z models do, and you can check this out later on this afternoon to see what's going on there. But I can show you this. This is what the ensemble average is doing. So we run the ECMWF 51 times and combine them. So we see that as we play through the next 10 days, which gets us out here, that pattern of troughs in the west, broader ridging in the midsection of the country is supposed to open up the warmth. We then look for the risk of cold air coming into this area, and I'm not seeing it in the ensembles. In fact, I'm seeing quite mild air going through the middle of this month. So that's kind of just an important transition. And we notice that once we get out there to the middle of the month, we start to lose the cold risks along the west coast as well. Finally, I do want to show you one last thing thinking about the frost. This is a map that shows you the probability of getting a temperature below 40 Fahrenheit. And if we just go out to that same time frame, so we're just kind of playing each day here, going through the weekend now. I'm just trying to get out there to that time frame I'm concerned about. Here we are. This would be early in the morning on the 11th. So probability of having a temperature below 40. This is all elevation driven. Now remember, this is a lower resolution model. Okay, so that's why it looks like it's all blurred out here. But then we go into the morning of the 12th. One more click. There we go. So we just see some chances here of having lows in the 30s, which is not uncommon for mid-May. But we're going to watch this time frame, maybe for the potential for some colder conditions. Like I said, though, the European model is the outlier in this situation, and the ensembles are not aggressively cold. So I'll stop it there, and hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow morning from the West Coast. Thanks.